There comes a time, often disguised as crisis, rejection, or unbearable emptiness, when a man or woman must depart from the roles they've inherited. The masks begin to crack, the applause loses its nourishment. The achievements, once worn as armor, now feel hollow, and in this silence a quiet voice arises, not from the world, but from within. This is the voice of the self, calling you toward individuation. Individuation is not about becoming better than others. It is about becoming whole within yourself. It is the process by which the unconscious becomes conscious, where the fragments of your being, your desires, fears, wounds, and dreams, are drawn together into an integrated totality. It is the soul's rebellion against conformity, against inherited belief systems, and against the safe mediocrity that society rewards. Most people remain trapped in the persona, the social mask worn to gain acceptance and admiration. But the mask is not the face, and while the persona seeks to please, the self seeks to become. The journey to inner authority begins when you no longer live to be seen, but to see, when your inner gaze becomes sharper than the world's approval. You begin to ask questions that unravel the narratives you were taught. Who am I when I am not performing? What do I value when no one is watching? Where does my power leave when I am stripped of all titles? These questions are not answered with logic. They are lived into, wrestled with, suffered through, for individuation is not self-improvement, it is self-confrontation. It is standing at the abyss between who you were told to be and who you truly are, and walking forward despite the terror. The individual who undergoes this transformation is not necessarily celebrated. They are often feared. For when a person becomes inwardly free, they disturb the systems that rely on obedience. But this disturbance is necessary. The world is changed not by those who conform, but by those who dare to embody their true form. And only those who have confronted their inner chaos can become a center of gravity in the outer world. To individuate is to take the throne within your own psyche, to become sovereign over your impulses, your projections, your inherited wounds. It is not an act of arrogance, but of responsibility. You become capable not because you wish to dominate, but because you refuse to be dominated by anything false, especially within yourself. It is a path walked alone, but it is never lonely, for in shedding the superficial, you gain access to the eternal. Archetypes emerge: the wise king, the nurturing mother, the sacred warrior, the wounded healer. They are not roles you play. They are energies you embody. You become more than a person. You become a presence. And in your presence, others remember something they've long forgotten about themselves. You do not shout. You do not persuade. You simply are, and that is enough to change everything. Power that endures does not arise from light alone. It is forged in the tension between light and darkness, between what we show and what we hide, between the mask we wear and the truths we bury beneath it. There is no genuine strength without the integration of the shadow. The shadow is everything within us that we refuse to see, cannot accept, or have been conditioned to suppress. It is our aggression, our envy, our lust, our fear, our inadequacy, our shame. But it is also our unclaimed vitality, our suppressed creativity, our forgotten instinct, our dormant courage. What we exile does not disappear, it festers. It manipulates us from behind the scenes. It appears in projection, in compulsions, in the way we sabotage our own rise and resent the success of others. What we do not own within, we will fight against without. To become whole, one must descend, not into chaos, but into oneself. Into the basement of the psyche. You must enter the hidden rooms of your being, the ones that are locked by trauma, guarded by guilt, or wallpapered with denial. There, in the silence, you will meet the parts of yourself that once frightened you. The child who was told to stay quiet, the rage that had no safe place to land, the hunger you pretended not to feel. These are not your enemies, they are fragments of your soul waiting to return. Power comes when you stop pretending. When you stand before your shadow and say, "You are mine," it is not the kind of power that shouts. It is the kind that emanates. It humbles you. It steadies you. You are no longer trying to appear perfect. You are committed to being real. You are not asking the world to like you. You are asking yourself to tell the truth. You become someone who cannot be easily manipulated because you have already made peace with your darkness. This is not an indulgence in your darker instincts, nor is it the glorification of pain. It is the alchemical act of transforming base emotion into wisdom. Rage becomes discernment, grief becomes compassion, fear becomes intuition, desire becomes direction. You are not erasing your shadow. You are giving it form, giving it voice, and placing it in service of your higher aim. Without the shadow, we are fragmented, and what is fragmented cannot stand with authority. Wholeness is not the absence of brokenness. It is the sacred act of stitching yourself together with brutal honesty and profound love. Only then can your presence carry weight. Only then can your words land with truth. Only then do you begin to radiate something that others recognize, not because you are above them, but because you have gone deeper than most are willing to go. The man or woman who integrates their shadow is no longer at war with themselves. They have ceased pretending. They have ceased performing. They have become a vessel of paradox, oft yet unyielding, grounded yet mysterious, fierce yet compassionate. And others feel it, not because it is taught, because it is felt. There are moments in life when a human being ceases to be merely an individual and becomes an embodiment, a symbol, an archetype. It does not happen by striving for image nor by social ambition. It happens when one aligns so deeply with the essence of who they are that they begin to carry the weight of something eternal. When you stand, not in ego, but in essence, you awaken dormant truths in others. You cease to merely exist, and instead you signify. This is the mystery of symbolic standing. You become a figure, not just a person, a signal to the unconscious. You are no longer just seen, you are felt. Your presence speaks before your mouth does. The room adjusts, the atmosphere thickens, not from threat, but from meaning, not because you demand attention, but because you represent something that touches something old and buried in everyone around you. Every culture across time has known this truth. Ancient myths, sacred stories, and tribal initiations all speak to the emergence of the archetypal human. The king, the sage, the warrior, the magician, the mother, the lover, the prophet. These are not roles to perform, they are psychic blueprints encoded within the collective unconscious. When you walk the path of inner work, when you confront your shadow, when you claim your inner authority, you do not just heal, you activate. You begin to constellate these timeless energies. To stand symbolically means that you are no longer interpreted merely through your biography. People no longer respond only to your words or your resume. They respond to something deeper. A presence that cannot be faked. Something in them stands when you stand, not because of you, but because of what you have come to represent. You become a walking myth, not inflated, not superior, simply in alignment with that which has always been. And the irony is that this transformation only occurs when you are no longer seeking to impress. You do not try to be the archetype. You do not pretend. You do not wear it like a costume. You embody it through truth, through suffering, through integration. Through the humility of becoming deeply human, you become something more than human. When you stand as a living archetype, you become a mirror. Others see themselves in you, often unconsciously. You provoke something sacred and often unsettling, the awareness of what they could be. You are not here to be adored. You are here to awaken, to disrupt, to call, and many will resist that call. Not because you are wrong, but because you remind them of what they have neglected in themselves. Symbolic standing is not about public recognition. It often goes unnoticed by the superficial gaze, but to those who see through the lens of soul, you are unmistakable. You become a kind of gravitational field. The lost orbit around you, the seekers are drawn to you, the unconscious begins to speak through encounters with you. Your life becomes a message, not written, but lived. To stand in this way is to carry responsibility, not to perform perfection, but to remain rooted in truth. The moment you betray your essence, the archetype withdraws. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be bought. It responds only to sincerity, and sincerity is not polished. It is raw, it is broken open, it is forged in fire. This is not a path of comfort, it is a path of becoming. You will not be celebrated by the many, but you will be recognized by the few who matter. You will find yourself walking with other symbols, other carriers of meaning. There will be fewer words, but more presence, fewer arguments, but deeper knowing, and together you will not build an empire. You will invoke a memory, the memory of something ancient, the memory of who we are beneath the noise, beyond the distractions, before the world told us who to be. There is a kind of presence that cannot be manufactured. It is not taught in speeches nor gained through performance. It is not about charisma, charm, or tactics of influence. It is the gravity of being, a silent power that radiates from the depths of a fully integrated soul. When a person carries this gravity, the room adjusts before they speak, not because they demand attention, but because they anchor it. This kind of presence is not loud. It does not chase applause. It does not beg to be seen. It simply is. Its strength lies not in domination, but in stillness, not in assertion, but in alignment. The individual who has cultivated this presence has descended into themselves. They have wandered the labyrinth of their own psyche. They have faced their brokenness without flinching. They have sat with their fears not to conquer them, but to understand their origin. What emerges from that descent is not arrogance. It is authority. True presence is the product of inner coherence. The mind, heart, and body are no longer at war. There is unity, and with unity comes weight. The individual becomes like a mountain, unmoved by storms, unprovoked by wind. They do not need to announce their worth. Their silence does it for them. Respect follows naturally because there is no contradiction between who they are and what they show. Respect earned this way is not transactional. It is not dependent on validation or external reinforcement. It flows from essence. You respect such a person not because of what they have, but because of what they have faced, because of what they carry quietly, because you sense the depth in them, even if you cannot name it. This is not the presence that comes from having all the answers. It is the presence that comes from having lived the questions, from having survived what could have destroyed them, and emerging not bitter, but wiser. There is a quality of dignity in them that no status can bestow, a deep-rooted knowing that requires no defense. They are not threatened by others' success. They are not shaken by others' judgment. Their sense of self is not outsourced. Such gravity cannot be imitated. It is cultivated in solitude, in silence, in the invisible choices made when no one is watching, in the refusal to betray one's truth, even when it would be easier, in the decision to stay with the pain until it teaches. These are not acts of performance. They are acts of inner allegiance, and they shape the soul into something that others instinctively trust. The gravity of presence also disarms. In their company, people lower their masks, not because they are told to, but because something in them feels safe. Or seen, or both. You will find that in the presence of such a person, people speak differently. They choose their words with more care. They confess things they didn't plan to share, not because they are coerced, but because the space allows for it. The presence itself becomes a sanctuary, a kind of psychic container where authenticity can breathe. And yet, this presence is not about being passive. It is not the quiet of avoidance. It is the stillness of someone who has earned the right to be still. It is the quiet after the storm, not the silence before it. There is intensity underneath, but it is tempered, refined, transmuted. It is the discipline of not needing to prove, the mastery of knowing when to speak, and when to let silence speak for you. You will recognize this gravity when you feel your own soul rise in its presence. You stand a little straighter, you listen more deeply, you want to become more honest, not for their approval, but because their existence challenges you to meet your own. They do not inspire through exhortation, they inspire through embodiment, and what they have become is not available to the impatient. It cannot be fast-tracked, it must be grown, slowly, painfully, earnestly. One fragment at a time, every scar is part of the architecture, every failure a brick in the foundation, every dark night a hidden teacher, and so the gravity of presence is never an accident. It is the natural result of unnatural courage. The courage to look within, to remain faithful to the journey, to not collapse under the weight of one's own becoming. These are the people we remember, not because of their noise, but because of the silence they left behind. There is no greatness that does not pass through the wilderness within, no mastery that is not first preceded by disorder. The individual who appears composed, deliberate, and capable before the world has not avoided chaos. They have confronted it. They have sat with their demons and refused to negotiate with delusion. They have made a home in uncertainty until it taught them its language. Chaos is not the enemy. It is the raw material of becoming. It is the prima materia of transformation, the blackness that precedes gold in alchemy, the storm that unearths buried truth. Chaos reveals what structure has hidden. It exposes the fault lines in the psyche, the places where you've relied on false identities, external validation, or inherited narratives. And once it begins to speak, it will not be silenced by distraction or denial. To confront inner chaos is to move inward when everything in you wants to run outward. It is to question the compulsions that once felt like instinct. It is to trace your rage back to the wound, your anxiety back to the lie, your numbness back to what you once could not bear to feel. It is the terrifying process of sorting through the ruins of your own psyche, deciding what to rebuild, what to bury, and what to resurrect. And from this confrontation, a different kind of capability is born, one that does not fluctuate with circumstance, one that is not dependent on mood, motivation, or applause. It is the capability of inner order, the ability to act with clarity amidst confusion, to hold integrity amidst temptation, to remain grounded amidst chaos, not because you are unaffected by it, but because you have befriended it. Inner order is not rigidity. It is not the suppression of emotion or the avoidance of pain. It is the disciplined structuring of your inner world around something deeper than impulse. It is the ability to discern what belongs in your life and what does not, what is true and what is convenient, what is yours and what was imposed upon you. This order is born of vision, not fear. It is not built to control life, but to navigate it with power and purpose. You do not build this kind of order by accident. It requires a willingness to stand in the mirror of your own life and truly see what is there, to no longer blame others for your emotional disarray, to no longer justify the avoidance of your own becoming, to take responsibility for the architecture of your own inner landscape, and so capability becomes more than a skill. It becomes a spiritual posture. You become someone others rely on, not because you are always right, but because you are rooted, because you do not collapse when things go wrong, because your internal world has been forged in fire, and it no longer trembles at the sound of thunder. The truly capable individual is not the one who has avoided failure, heartbreak, or despair. It is the one who has ordered themselves around what remains after the collapse. They are not simply efficient, they are integrated. Their decisions are not reactions. They are emanations of deep clarity. Their goals are not born from lack, but from alignment. They no longer chase productivity as a way to outrun their inner void. They no longer perform success to silence the inner critic. They no longer mistake chaos for freedom or noise for meaning. Their life moves in rhythm with something older, deeper, and more sacred than mere achievement. Their presence calms others, not because they pretend to have all the answers, but because they are no longer afraid of the questions. And so inner order becomes the foundation of influence. You begin to lead, not from a title, but from a state of being. Others sense your clarity and begin to trust their own. You become a quiet invitation to rise, not by force, but by example. You are no longer tossed by the waves of external chaos because you have faced the storm within, and in doing so, you have discovered something unshakable beneath the noise. The greatest legacy one can leave is not wealth, fame, or even wisdom spoken. It is transformation embodied, not in others, but in oneself. When an individual becomes wholly themselves, when they wrestle with the chaos within, integrate their shadows, and walk with symbolic presence, they become an axis around which others may turn. Their being becomes a center of gravity, a quiet invitation, a living myth that awakens the sleeping gods in those around them. This is not influence as the world defines it. It is not manipulation, coercion, or persuasion. It is not branding the self as an image, but becoming so real, so whole, that the boundaries between who you are and what you represent begin to dissolve. People are not drawn to you, they are drawn to themselves through you. You become a mirror, but a mythic one, reflecting not the ego but the soul, not the personality but the potential. To become this axis requires more than insight. It requires transfiguration. You must go beyond knowing yourself. You must become yourself entirely. Not the version shaped by cultural conditioning, not the mask built for survival, but the deeper self, the one that has always been watching from behind your eyes, waiting patiently for your return. This self is not achieved, it is uncovered. It emerges when you strip away the falsehoods you inherited, when you stop asking for permission to exist, when you begin living as if your very breath mattered. It is the self that walks not with certainty, but with conviction. Not with pride, but with sacred burden, for to live from this place is to carry something ancient, invisible, and utterly personal. When you become aligned with the self, your actions begin to ripple across invisible dimensions. A simple word from you penetrates deeper. A glance, a silence, a presence. These become instruments of transformation in others, not because you are powerful, but because you are transparent, a clear channel through which the archetypal forces can move. You are no longer centered in your ego. You are centered in the deeper order of being. Others feel this, often without understanding why. In your presence they remember something they had forgotten, a dignity, a dream, a voice inside them they had silenced long ago. Your life becomes a threshold, not a spectacle, but a passageway. Those who encounter you are not simply impressed. They are shifted, not toward you, but toward themselves. This is the legacy that outlives the body, not the buildings you build or the accolades you collect, but the initiations you spark in others simply by daring to be whole. You do not force them to change. You awaken their capacity to choose it. Your life becomes a sacred disturbance, not of comfort, but of sleep. You walk through the world like a flame, not to burn, but to illuminate the paths others forgot they had the strength to take. But to carry this legacy is to walk a narrow road. You will not always be understood. You will not always be liked, because when you live as a mirror, people will either awaken or recoil. You will touch something sacred, and the sacred is often feared. But you do not need them to worship you. You need only remain faithful to the self, and so you keep walking, not above others, but through them. You move through crowds unseen, yet unforgettable. You speak into chaos without raising your voice. You shape futures by embodying wholeness in the present, and though your name may one day be forgotten, your impact will live in the stories others tell themselves when they finally decide to wake up.